Okay, so the yen, we know the intervention took place July 31st, right? We'll get into that with the tweet in just a second. That went unnoticed, undercovered. Um, but yeah, this situation right now, we're in kind of the like a pause. Like this thing, think about it as a like business negotiation. What Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did with the move he made on July 31st. You know, the photograph over the shoulder of the handwritten note. You know, all for the camera. Um, think about that as like a business negotiation. He's put out the first offer, or he not an offer, but forced the other side of the opposition to respond. And so we're in that intermediate period here, and this could last a few weeks. We'll get into the Asheville, North Carolina meeting on the schedule between G20 finance ministers and central banking officials. Um, but it's basically an unresolved open piece of business. And then while that's going on, because this is like the one of the largest foreign exchange kind of trades, opportunities, all of that, like left to be worked out. You know, these things happen like a few times a century. It's that like level of scale that's riding on the line. But expect that yen situation to sit there and linger. It's like a steak or chicken, whatever, marinating. You got to give it time. But in the meantime, while we wait, the real interesting things are happening. So we'll start this with an article from Bloomberg this week that, if you think about kind of incentives, how the different players operate this, a lot of the negotiations are taking place in public, and then there's a private, closed doors kind of scene around that process as well. But this Bloomberg article that hit, I want to say Tuesday this week, kind of like it showed to me like a divide and conquer tactic to try to put some air between Treasury Secretary Bessent and Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi. And basically, the gist of this article, what they actually got across, like all good propaganda, it's rooted in a grain of truth. Think about this negotiation. Like, use the analogy. It's the high stakes game in the private, invite only room of the casino, the high rollers room. And Sanae Takaichi is literally the one playing the hand, or at least that's how it appears. And they're mentioning like a sense of uncertainty rooted in her mentor Shinzo Abe's experience back in 2006. We're going deep in the history now of Japanese
Japanese
politics.
politics, yeah.
Not really though. This is all within a lifetime, so I could consider that recent. But Abe was in a similar situation on its face, but it was completely different, right? So in his first stint as PM, that was basically in and out. It was not a successful run. You think about the Liz Truss, did she outlast the head of lettuce? Shinzo Abe wasn't in and out like on that short of a time scale, but it was like a year, right? And part of this in 2006, the central bankers or the finance officials that came to Shinzo Abe and he trusted for guidance, he went along with the rate hike, and ultimately it cost him. The article mentions not just his seat as prime minister, as he lost kind of confidence of the governing coalition, but also his personal health. So if you put yourself in Sanae Takaichi's shoes, she's not coming from the world of cross-border finance and capital. So everything going on here, like the key battlefront, like key arena where the action is now taking place, this isn't her expertise. So she not only has to rely on other people's judgments on what's best for Japan's political situation, financial situation, all of that. She's not an expert, so she has to like trust other people. So
Right.
like all good poker players, like there's some element of like there's quantitative skills involved, probabilities, understanding the math of the game. But if you actually examine like the best poker players, just to take this analogy and max it out, the best players are the ones who can read other players, right? you've seen stories. Remember when online poker was a thing? Cameron, this might be before your time, but you'd have
A little bit, yeah.
young hotshots who would just tape over their hole cards and show that they could win a tournament, just purely playing the other person's hand. Um, just making a little metaphor here. This is kind of the situation Takaichi's in. And the grain of truth here is like, yeah, she's going to be nervous. This is, everything's riding on the line. Probably the biggest, uh, capital at risk trade, one way or the other, which way the yen goes. And ultimately, like her role as prime minister, everything's riding on this. So when you see those other headlines, I didn't paste them in here, but like polling showing her approval rating has fallen by 10 points from, I don't know, 60 to 50 or 70 to somewhere up there. Who knows if that polling's even accurate? You can manufacture that to, tell that story like what you want it to reflect. But my point here, yes, the Takaichi kind of story is real, but then if you're looking for a wedge, this is that opening. So we'll see that one, continue to play out in the weeks ahead. But like I was talking about, this is sitting on the warmer as the heat gets turned up on the yen situation. And if you go to this tweet from Scott Bessent on July 31st, this is the one I was talking about that went over the head of everybody as we were overly focused on the handwritten note. Note here, the kind of foretelling of the BOJ's Governor Ueda meeting with Bessent at the G20 finance ministers meeting, which it's like a back-to-back event. There's the finance ministers, and then there's the central bankers coming in alongside them. And I think it goes from August 29th to September 1st. That's going to be in Asheville, North Carolina, which, as everybody should know, Bessent, he's a South Carolina native, lives in Charleston. So this is like a 4-hour drive up into the mountain resort town of Asheville. So if you're thinking about the meetings, like it's a lot of symbolism here, a lot of backdrop, but it is Bessent's literal neck of the woods where everybody's coming in to take place. Now, I think everybody like on Twitter, what's going to sell or get the clip up new Bretton Woods, right? The way I would think about this, we're not even close to establish like all the players establishing and coming to the table to agree on something. Like we're still, we've still got the open questions and say Iran, the yen, all of the above. This isn't in my mind. This isn't like June 1944, July 1944, where like everybody's coming in to agree upon and sign.
We're not that far along yet. I see.
Exactly. This is laying the groundwork. So if you look into that, like as World War II was progressing, these meetings were already like on the books. Everybody was coming in, gathering inputs, all that stuff. And it took a couple of years for that order to emerge. What this represents in my mind is like the early iterations of that process. So there's still a lot left open. Like we have to get through how the yen carry trade is going to resolve all of that. But what you're looking for here, just forward progress. They actually had a G20 finance ministers meeting back in April. They didn't even issue a joint statement coming out of that. Like there was so little agreed upon. Well, a lot in the world has changed, as we know, in 4 or 5 months. But just for forward progress here, you're looking for like a compact or just a jointly written communique with progress on items like programs to improve sovereign debt workouts. We've talked about the Venezuela dollar debt situation. There's other ones out there, Pakistan, Lebanon, etc. So some framework to agree upon the unpayable debts coming out of this offshore dollar system. Some efforts to preserve open payment channels. We've talked about the breakdown, the like kicking Russia off of SWIFT, all of that, as the kind of the global meshwork, mesh payment system starts to erode and break down. Expect like something to come along the lines of agreement around preservation of these payment channels. Now, what they look like is going to be totally different. We'll get into that in another section down the road. And we're just starting to see the early kind of green shoots of just organic things springing up there. On another front, you want to see things like strengthening anti-fraud cooperation. So the fraud within the financial system, just attacking, from some countries against the other, like pig butchering scandals, all of that. Seeing something on that front would be positive progress. And then, as Besant talks about the global imbalances, just something to address those. And then also just the fragmentation you're seeing as this old offshore dollar transitions into its sunset, something that gives us the ability to glue back together what we have, like before the whole thing just withers away.
Right.
That's what we're hoping for coming out of Asheville. If there's no progress, then that's not a good thing for obvious reasons. But that if you're looking for the next stage in the intervention, I would expect some development. Doesn't have to be big, but something that provides some resolution coming out of that meeting.
And just to advocate for ourselves here in a little bit, I know, Matt, you found on the Treasury site there's an actual media and press request. So if anybody has connections, we would love to be able to go and report back on what we see there, what we hear there. But I think we're going to try to see what we can do. Doubtful, but we're a small subscriber base, but would be very interesting to be there, especially given Matt's framework that we've laid out here. So
we'll treat this administration better than Reuters. I'm sure of that.